So we're in the Masachet of Yevamot, which is about something which is translated as usually as levirate marriage. If a man dies without children, then his brother marries his wife in order to raise up children in his name. And in theory, the Masachet, the tractate, seems to be about levirate marriage, but actually it's about marriage itself. It's the first tractate in the order of Nashim, order of women. It really deals with questions as to what are permitted relationships and what are not permitted relationships. And this discussion this discussion is articulated through the lens of Yevamot, through the lens of levirate marriage. But really, the discussion is kind of what marriages are permitted. And the first chapter begins with a list of 15 forbidden relationships. The result of these relationships is that if a man may die and childless, but his wife cannot become the wife of his brother, and by the way, none of her quote rival wives. If the deceased had more than one wife, then the wives are called rivals. Not only if one of these is because of some forbidden relationship can't marry the brother, then none of his wives can marry the brother. In other words, she is exempt, and so are all her rivals. And the Mishnah in the first chapter shocks us with this list of 15 forbidden relationships, and then gradually it explains them one by one. And as we jump into the second chapter, we're going to go through one more of these relationships, which was just mentioned in the first chapter, but never really properly explained. And the Mishnah is going to answer, Keitzad Eisha Achiv Shelo Haya B'Olamo. What is the case of the wife who was never in his world? It's an absolutely extraordinary expression. Eishet Achiv Shelo Haya B'Olamo, the wife of his brother, so his brother's wife, who was never in his world, i.e., and the Mishnah is now going to explain what it means by never in his world is that the existence of the brother and the wifely relationship never existed at the same time. And the brother was born later. And let's just examine this. So the Mishnah goes on. The Mishnah is going to explain it. The editors of the Mishnah must have realized this was confusing because they spell these cases all out in detail. Shnei achem umet echad mehem. So there are two brothers, and one of them dies. V'nolad lahem ach, and afterwards a third brother is born. So the parents are still producing brothers. They started out with two, then they went down to one, and now they're back up to two because a new brother has been born. Now, the two brothers who died, the two brothers who existed previously, one of whom died, they had wives. They both had wives actually, and I've got a picture here. I've copied a picture out of Steinsaltz for you, and I put it on the source sheet. I'm not sure necessarily how helpful these pictures are, but I thought it's interesting to try them. So the two original brothers are Shimon and Reuven. Reuven dies. Reuven's married to Penina. Reuven dies. So Shimon actually takes Penina as his levirate wife. And we're going to see in a minute that Shimon's going to die too. The whole question, this would not, if Shimon stayed alive, it wouldn't be a problem. And what do we mean by a brother who didn't come into the world? Well, they have a new brother called Levi. He's down in the picture here. But he's a new brother. When Reuven was married to Penina, Levi didn't exist. So Penina now is married to Shimon, but Shimon's died. So we're going to ask the question, well, can Penina then become the levirate wife of Levi? That's the question. But Levi is a brother. Levi's a brother who kind of wasn't in the world when she was married to Reuven? That's the question that the Mishnah is addressing. And well, let's go back to the Mishnah now. So we're looking at the case of the wife whose brother was never in the world. So, and the Mishnah mentions this in the first, the Mishnah mentions this in the first chapter. That 15 women exempt their rival wives, that 15 women exempt their rival wives and the rival wives of their rival wives from Chalitza and from Yibum until the end of the world. And here's the list of the 15. And the wife who was the wife of his brother who was never in the world is in this list of 15, i.e. she's forbidden to, she's going to be forbidden to the new brother. So let's just go through this example. Let's just keep going through the Mishnah. So there were two brothers. One of them died. They had a new brother. And after that, the second brother married the wife of his first brother, and he died. He died too. So now we've got two brothers. Harishona yotze mishum eshet achiv shelo haya Harishona yotza mishum eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olamo. The first woman is exempt. She's exempt from Yibum with the third brother as the wife of his brother who was never in his world. What's the significance of never in his world? Well, we've learned in the verses that we originally learned when we started looking at the whole question of levirate marriage. We learned the verses from Deuteronomy. Ki yeshavu achim yachdav. If brothers dwell together, umeit achad mehem, and one of them dies, uven ein lo, and he doesn't have a brother, he doesn't have a son. Lot ye eshet hamet hachutza le'ir. The wife of the dead shall not be married outside, but actually she marries her husband's brother. And this whole issue, this whole halacha, the whole question of levirate marriage only applies when two brothers dwell together. Ki yeshvu achim yachdav. When two brothers dwell together. And the case we're looking at now, where, okay, these two brothers dwelt together, Reuven and Shimon, they dwelt together, they lived at the same time, but Levi wasn't born until later. Levi never dwelt with them when Penina was married. So the whole question of levirate marriage, of Yibum and Chalitza, it never applies to Levi because he didn't dwell with them. That's essentially what the Mishnah is telling us. And so the Mishnah spells it out. Harishona yotza mishum eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olam. The first woman is exempt from Yibum with the third brother because she's the wife of a brother who was never in his world. Her husband was never in the world of Levi, the third wife. And the second wife, because any second wife belonging to the first, belonging to her husband, is also exempt because she's a rival wife. Asava mama, in other words, the whole question of levirate marriage doesn't apply in this case. And then the Mishnah goes on, Asava ma'amar, if he had ma'amar with her, umate, he had ma'amar with her and then he died. So in this case, Shimon, rather than marrying Penina in levirate marriage and then dying, he has ma'amar with Penina and then he dies. What is a ma'amar? A ma'amar is essentially a betrothal document that the Mishnah kind of expect us to know this, and the commentators don't pick it up particularly. I think the commentators expect us to know this. But the halacha thinks about a levirate marriage as one that kind of it's triggered by the death. It's triggered by the death of the husband and by the life of another brother. It happens automatically. And it doesn't require any betrothal document. And you can imagine the rabbis The rabbis are really uncomfortable about this. So the rabbis actually require a betrothal document, either with money or with a document. In other words, with the traditional ways in which you betroth a woman in normal circumstances. And that rabbinic betrothal document for a levirate marriage is called a ma'amar. Literally, you'd say it's a speaking. It's as if he'd spoken to her about it. He's agreed to do the levirate marriage. So what's happening in this case? So our brother Shimon he hasn't concluded levirate marriage with Penina, but he's arranged to do it. He's given her a document, or he's given her money guaranteeing that he's going to do it. And then what does he do? He dies. Asaba mamar umeit. He had mamar with her and he died. Shnia choletze velo mitya Bennett. The second wife performs chalitza, but she can't have yibum. Why is that? Because the second wife is really released by the fact that the first wife can't have yibum. She can't have levirate marriage. But in this case, the first wife, so why she has to perform chalitza, she can't have yibum. She has to perform chalitza, she can't have yibum. Because in this case, Shimon and Penina aren't considered to be properly married. So any secondary wives of Shimon aren't released by Penina's inability to carry out levirate marriage. In other words, she never came in, right? So she never goes out. She's never properly married in, so she never goes out. And so she never exempts her rivals, at least in a rabbinics, from the point of, you could say, Doraita, she never exempts her rivals. But of course, this ma'amar, this rabbinic marriage contract does exist. So we're in a kind of a gray situation, I suppose you would say. And when we're in a gray situation, the rabbis will always say, we perform chalitza, but we can't have yibum. In other words, just out of doubt, we perform chalitza, i.e. we perform the refusal, but she can't have yibum. She's not released. Whereas if Penina and Shimon had been properly married by levirate marriage, then any other wives would have been completely released by Penina's release. That's really what the Mishnah is saying. And then it goes into an almost identical situation. Two brothers, one of them died, the second had yibum with his dead brother's wife. But after the yibum, after the levirate marriage, after another brother was born and the second was died, and the second brother died. And so this brother, let's just go back to the picture. So in the second Mishnah, the second brother, Levi, he's actually born after the second marriage. Sorry, he's born before the second marriage, but after the first. In other words, he's never really, in terms of the test, have the brothers lived together. Levi's never lived together with Reuven being married, but he has lived together with Shimon being married. That's the teaser which the Mishnah wants to present to us. Let's go back and look at the Mishnah again. Two brothers, one of them died. The second one carries out levirate marriage with his wife. After that, the third brother is born. So the third brother has kind of existed in life with his second brother, and the supposition is that the second brother now dies. But it doesn't make any difference, because somehow Penina has the status of the woman whose sort of relationship to levirate marriage is based on a relationship that was never in this world. she's released by virtue of her relationship with Reuven, even though the relationship with Shimon, the relationship between Shimon and the third brother Levi, was in their joint lifetimes. And then the Mishnah continues in exactly the same way. So the first wife's exempt on account of her being the wife of his brother who was never in this world. That is the wife of the first brother who was never in this world. The second one because she's a rival wife. Asaba Ma'amar, if he made a betrothal document with her, umate, and then died. The second one must perform chalitza and may not have yibum. And Rabbi Shimon disagrees. The halacha actually doesn't go with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon actually doesn't agree with his categorization, and he says, look, he can marry whichever one he likes, or choletz la'ezo sheyirtzeh, or either of them can perform chalitza as they like. And the Mishnah then concludes with a general rule, which will be explained in later Mishnayot. Klal amru ba Yevamot. There's a general rule about Yevamot. Kol shi asura asur erava. Whenever she's forbidden as a forbidden relationship. So whenever the lever at marriage would create incest, lo choletzet velo mitya bemet. She doesn't perform chalitza and she doesn't have yibum. In other words, the whole, if you like, the whole structure of yibum just falls apart. There's no yibum. There's no yibum, and therefore there's no need to release the yibum. So lo choletzet velo mitya bemet. Yibum just doesn't exist. There's no need to release it. Isur mitzvah. If there's an isur from the point of view of mitzvah, that's slightly different. Ve isur kedusha, or a prohibition due to holiness. And we're going to find out what these are in the following Mishnah. So we'll find out what these are tomorrow. Choletzet velo mitya benet. She must perform chalitza. She may not perform yibum. I.e., if there's, if in theory she could marry the brother of her deceased husband, but it's forbidden to do so because of a mitzvah or because of some issue kedusha. Well, we ask her to do chalitza. We ask her effectively to release herself from the yibum. And the Mishnah continues with a final example. What if her sister is also her sister-in-law? So in other words, we got a situation here. If your sister is your sister-in-law, we got two sisters who are marrying two brothers. I'm not quite sure why the Mishnah just didn't paint it this way. Two sisters married two brothers. Or choletzet or mitya benet. She can either perform chalitza or have yibum. This is a situation where one of the sisters, maybe one of the sisters, for example, is, say, the mother-in-law of the surviving brother. So there is a clear prohibition there. The yibum does not exist. The yibum does not exist with that sister because it's a forbidden relationship. But because it doesn't exist, it doesn't exempt. Because it doesn't exist, it doesn't exempt the. Let's just go really slowly here. The relationship doesn't exist. So in theory, she could. If the relationship doesn't exist, gosh, we might have to come back to this tomorrow. Well, maybe we'll come back to this tomorrow. Let me stop. I'm out of time. This is very complicated. Let me stop talking now and open it up for any questions.